Support comes from Mosby Building Arts. Sometimes the smaller home projects make the biggest difference. Mosby creates custom spaces that help you love your home even more. For projects big and small, visit callmosby.com.
From St. Louis Public Radio, this is St. Louis on the Air. I'm Alex Hoyer. There's an old adage in the news business of, if it bleeds, it leads, and that's especially true in local TV news. It's not uncommon to tune into the nightly news where you see crime scene tape that fills the screen or a fire. But amid all the bad news, our guest today carved out a niche of highlighting good news, the best humanity has to offer, of people making a difference. Mike Bush did that for 41 years in St. Louis, and all at one place, at KSDK Channel 5, and he anchored his last newscast about a week and a half ago.
So after 41 years, I'm not going to say goodbye. I'll just say thank you. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for growing older with me. Thank you for letting me tell your stories. And thank you for turning a 5-year-old boy's dream into a career better than he could have imagined. It has been a privilege. And there you have it. 5 on your side at 6. Thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you soon.
That's Mike Bush signing off on the 6 o'clock news earlier this month. Mike, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Thanks very much, Alex.
So that sign-off was just 11 days ago, perhaps just a bit of time to reflect on all of the events and some really nice tributes. Has it sunk in yet?
I would say that, I've been kind of overwhelmed with the response. People have been so kind and so nice, and that's been very gratifying. But in terms of, getting up for work, it just feels like I'm on vacation, and pretty soon I'm going to have to go back. That's what it feels like to me. I have not been able to accept the fact that I'm flexible now, and I can pretty much do what I want.
Mm-hmm. You're a pro, but I heard in your voice there on that last newscast, I could tell you were emotional. What was going through your mind when you made those comments?
Well, I was thinking of how grateful I am to the viewers of St. Louis who, allowed me into their living rooms. Back in the 1980s when I first started, at 10 o'clock, your options to watch TV where you watch the news at 10 o'clock on Channel 5 or Channel 4 or Channel 2, or you watch reruns of some show on Channel 11, and that was it. There was not really any other options. So we had a very big audience, and, I guess in that time it was what you would call the kind of the golden era of local TV. And I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity to be in that place, at that station, at that time, and in a city that I just absolutely love. It was the right fit for me, and like I say, people have been so kind here. I'm still just getting used to the idea that I don't, like yesterday on a Sunday. I've been working Sunday through Thursday for almost my entire career in St. Louis. I didn't have to go to work yesterday. That was just a little strange.
Yeah, I can imagine so after doing something the same way for so many years, year after year. You grew up in Chicago, and we heard in that clip at the beginning of the show that we just played that being a broadcaster was a dream when you were 5 years old. Exactly what was 5-year-old Mike Bush's dream? Well,
I was probably the only young 5-year-old who was sitting there watching the local news and local sports. In Chicago, the Chicago Cubs, because they played afternoon games, were on the TV on WGN every single day. And so I remember wanting my parents to buy me a little tape recorder. It was a little reel-to-reel tape recorder that had a microphone, and I would turn down the sound to the Cubs games, and I would just do the announcing. I just thought, listen, if I can't play Major League Baseball, and I was a decent ball player, but nowhere near good enough to make it to the major leagues. I thought, well, this is the next best thing. And so I would do that. I would watch the local news, and I just wanted to be a broadcaster, and it never changed. Even at a very young age, that's what I wanted to do, and it never wavered my entire life.
Do you still have those tapes?
I don't think so. They I don't know if you remember, you're too young, but before cassettes, before 8 tracks, before digital, tape recorders they had little reel-to-reels.
We still have one in the building, just in case.
Do you? Mm-hmm. And because it was a portable, these were just little reel-to-reels. Mm-hmm. And in fact, not too long ago, I was watching this episode of Mary Tyler Moore, if you remember her show where Ted Baxter and Lou Grant and those guys were on. She was trying out sportscasters, and she had little reel-to-reel tapes, which of course didn't make any sense because they were doing television, and they wouldn't just listen to an audio tape. And she was looking at audio tapes. But those were the reels that I used on that little tape recorder, and I'm sure I just kept taping over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. But like I say, it never wavered. And then when I got to high school, New Trier West High School had a high school radio station, WNTH 88.1 FM, and I headed there, and I spent 4 years just doing everything from music radio shows to I was the sports director, so I got to do the high school basketball games, football games, baseball games, stuff like that. And then my last year there, I was named the general manager, mm-hmm. which
that's a big deal when you're going through
when
school
you're going through high school.
Yes,
it was a big deal, and there was a little board of teachers who decided mm-hmm. for me to do that. So it was a big deal, but again, it just never wavered. I just wanted to be a broadcaster.
And so how did that inform where you went to college?
Well, the story was I was looking around for schools that had local TV in a town small enough, but big enough to have local TV stations, but small enough where maybe you could get a chance. And so my parents and our family had gone out to Tucson, Arizona on a number of occasions to go to dude ranches and stuff on spring break. And I really liked Tucson, Arizona. And I thought, well, at the time it was like the 110th TV market or whatever. And I went there, and as soon as I got there, I started calling the news director at the NBC station. Well, I did all the stations, but the NBC station was most accommodating. And they said, sure, come on in. And mm-hmm. I was an intern at KBOA. That was my first job. No money or anything, but I did everything from running the teleprompter to sweeping the floors to doing anything they asked me to do. And that eventually turned into my first job. And
it really is that experience that you get doing the thing. There is value to learning about it, to studying journalism, to studying broadcasting, but doing the thing I found really, really helps.
I think it's the most important thing. And I think that's one of the great things about Mizzou is that they have KOMU, and you get to learn how to produce, you get to learn how to shoot, you get to learn how to report. You really have to do it to get good at it. And so, I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity. And then I was an intern for 9-10 months or whatever, and Governor Bruce Babbitt was coming to town on a Saturday, and our one reporter on the weekends called in sick. They said, Mike, why don't you go cover it? So I covered it. I did the report that night. It was the lead story on the newscast, mm-hmm. and I got a job from doing that report.
Your career path after college wound its way through a couple of different cities, but you did, of course, wind up in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. What was it about the St. Louis opportunity that drew your attention? How did you come here?
Well, when I worked in Tucson, New Orleans, Kansas City, and then St. Louis, all in about 5 or 6 years. When I was in New Orleans, I was doing the weekend sports there at WVUE TV, and my weekend producer is a guy named Louis Manito. He was brilliant. He's just he was a native New Orleanian, but just really good at his job. And he eventually got a job at KSDK in St. Louis, and he called me one day when I was in Kansas City, and he said, we have a job opening for a sportscaster. And so I sent him my tape, and he gave it to the news director, and they called me and offered me a job, and that's how it all began. I had been fired in Kansas City. They had we were the lowest rated station at the time, and Len Dawson, who was the great Hall of Fame quarterback for the Chiefs, had worked at this station previously, had left, and wanted to come back. And so they wanted Len Dawson over Mike Bush, which made a lot of sense. And I was looking for jobs, and I interviewed in Boston. I interviewed in Richmond, Virginia. I was just looking around, and St. Louis just was the perfect fit. And my best friend, Louis, was here, so I thought, well, this will work out great.
Paint a picture of what sports was like in St. Louis at that time when you came here in 1985. Whitey Ball comes to mind for me, and I think the old NFL Cardinals were still here then.
So the football Cardinals were still here. Obviously, the Blues were here. We had Whitey Ball. In 1985, I had worked half the year in Kansas City, and then I moved to St. Louis, and then I worked the second half of the baseball season in St. Louis. So the World Series was the Royals and the Cardinals, and I knew both teams because I had covered them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that was a lot of fun until the Don Denkinger call, because I really wanted the Cardinals to win over this place that I had to leave. But yeah, I mean, it was a happening place. I tell everybody, KSDK at the time was at 1000 Market Street. They were there until this past January for all of that time. And when I moved from Kansas City to St. Louis, we worked in the basement of the Lyric Opera House, was the television station in Kansas City, Channel 9. They've since moved into a brand new, beautiful building. But at the time, we were in the basement. In fact, on opera nights, you could hear the opera. But it was right in downtown Kansas City, and downtown Kansas City was dead. I mean, across the street from us was an old boarded-up hotel. Down the block was another boarded-up hotel. It was dead. And I moved to St. Louis, and there's this energy downtown. We had the Southwestern Bell building. There were restaurants. It was really happening. And so I'm coming into this city where I'm thinking, this is fantastic. There's so much energy. There's a lot of sports because of the football Cardinals, the baseball Cardinals, the St. Louis Blues. So it was a lot of fun back then, and it was a lot of fun to be a sportscaster. And, of course, the Cardinals went to the World Series in '85. They went to the World Series in 1987, and I got to be a part of covering all of that.
Sports journalism in St. Louis doesn't seem nearly as competitive as it was 10, 15 years ago, and certainly not as competitive as it was when you arrived. How did you try to differentiate your sports coverage amid all the others?
I think we just tried to be as creative as possible. We would try to one of the first things I did, so I got some advice from a sportscaster named Fred Rogan in Los Angeles. And he told me, he said, if you're going to make a name for yourself in a town, you have to have a Sunday night sports show. It's very, very important. And other sportscasters had mentioned that to me, too. So I went to our general manager at the time. His name was Bill Bolster. He was the most intimidating news executive that I had ever come across. But he was very supportive of me. And I went to him and I said, listen, I really would like to have a Sunday night sports show. I think it would be helpful for me to, gain a foothold in St. Louis. And I also think, there's an appetite for it in St. Louis because we have so much sports. And he said, well, why would I do that? Right now, we air at 10:30 on Sunday nights, The Love Connection. Do you remember The Love Connection? You probably don't.
I didn't watch it, but I had Game Show Network.
Okay. So Chuck Woolery was the host. He used to say, we'll be back in 2 and 2.
2 and 2. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they were number one. But I kind of wore him down, and he said, okay, I'll give you 7 extra minutes at the end of the newscast. And so then they would air Love Connection. So that's what we did, and, the ratings were good. So eventually they allowed me to do a half-hour sports show, and again, the ratings turned out to be okay. And then we did an hour, and getting that Sunday night sports show, I think, and starting Sports Plus, I think was helped us competitively, and also it was an opportunity for us to have some autonomy within the newsroom because people kind of left us alone. It was a Sunday. News executives weren't there. And we were just determined to get the best guests, have the best content, do the best stories. And of the things that I did in sports during my entire time doing sports at KSDK, that was the most fun.
What was your favorite sport to cover in St. Louis?
Well, I grew up loving baseball, as I mentioned earlier, turning down the sound. But I love it all. I really loved it all. It was great. But getting to be around the Cardinals and getting to be in a major league city and getting to see the players, not only the players that were on the Cardinals, but also any player that would come through, the Barry Bonds of the world, and just getting to be, an eyewitness to history every time history was made for baseball. That was my favorite thing. But, I loved it all. I loved covering the Blues. There was no player I've ever come across that was more fun to cover than Brett Hull, because he always spoke his mind with the Blues.
He's a character.
He is, and he was a fantastic player. I mean, every single night you could go to the old arena, and there's a good chance Brett Hull's going to score a goal. So he was a lot of fun to cover. And then when the Rams got here in '95, I just jumped on that bandwagon and just loved every second of that as well.
Well, and I want to pick up on the Rams after we take a break. But before we do that, I interviewed a couple years ago on the show Bob Costas, who was in town, as you know, to receive the Stan Musial Lifetime Achievement Award. And I asked him the same question, what his favorite sport to cover was. And he didn't give me an answer, but he said that baseball was his first love.
Yeah.
And that sounds true for you, too.
Yeah, same thing. Same thing. And no one knows more about baseball and baseball history than Bob.
Well, and he had a lot of good things to say about you. There was an excellent KSDK 45-minute news package that was produced that was a career retrospective. So I highly recommend that if they want to learn more about your career.
He was so generous to me, still is generous to me. I was this local sportscaster in St. Louis. He was living in St. Louis, and we would call him all the time to come on and be on Sports Plus. And it didn't help his career any bit for him to be on a little local TV show, but he came often. I interviewed him many, many times. I was intimidated every time because he's so brilliant and I think the best television sportscaster ever. But he has been generous to me, and we were so honored to give him the Musial Award a couple of years ago.
I'm talking with Mike Bush, who retired earlier this month after a 41-year career at KSDK Channel 5. We'll be back to continue this conversation in just a moment, but we also want to hear from you. Do you have a question for Mike, or perhaps a reflection on a favorite story or a memory? Give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 314-382-TALK, or you can email us at talk@stlpr.org. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio. Welcome back. I'm Alex Hoyer. I'm talking this hour with Mike Bush. Mike retired earlier this year after a 41-year career at KSDK Channel 5, working in both sports and news. To continue talking about sports for a little bit, you dipped your toe into the radio play-by-play with football, and not just any season, the 1999 St. Louis Rams season, which, spoiler alert, they won the Super Bowl that year. How did the play-by-play opportunity come about?
There was an opening. Gary Bender had done it a couple of years before, and he left to do the Bears game, and so I just expressed interest in it and fortunately got the job. However, I was told by my bosses, because I was under contract, and for me to do anything else, they had right of first refusal. And so I went to the boss and said, I've been offered this opportunity. I think it would be, a good thing for us, for Channel 5, but also for me, and again, continue to get that foothold in St. Louis. And he said, well, that's fine, but your first responsibility will be to Channel 5. And so just because you're doing the Rams games doesn't mean you won't be, doing Sports Plus on Sunday night. So it was a very stressful year for me. very long days on those Sundays, but what an opportunity. And, they only won 4 games the year before. So we had no expectations that they were going to win the Super Bowl. We thought, oh, okay, well, they've made some good acquisitions. They got, Marshall Faulk. They already had good receivers in Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt. They had drafted Orlando Pace. So we thought they'd be a better team, but we didn't think they were going to win the Super Bowl. And then, lightning struck, and they were just fantastic. And it was from the opening snap of the preseason, it was, well, this is going to be electric. So it was a lot of fun, but also for me personally, it was a very stressful year.
That was a really, really special season. Did it feel that way at the time?
Yes. No, I mean, they were so exciting on the field. We hadn't seen the greatest show on turf, and we hadn't seen anything like this. Every game was exciting. And so, they were a lot of fun to cover because I would say over and over again, touchdown Rams, because they scored so many touchdowns. But yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. And then I would do the Dick Vermeil show for pregame. And so I got to spend a lot of time with Dick in his office. And he's one of the great human beings I've ever met in sports. And he taught me so much about football. And again, could not have been kinder. And I think all those players today would still run through a wall for Dick Vermeil.
Other than doing play-by-play as a 5-year-old with the reel-to-reel, had you done play-by-play before then?
Yeah, I had done. So one of the things that had happened along the way, I had been offered a job. I was here about 5 years. I had been offered a job at ESPN, but I was under contract, so they had to let me. They had to say no to that. But they said if you get some weekend play-by-play opportunities, and it doesn't affect what you're doing at Channel 5, feel free. So I did a bunch of ESPN basketball games. I did ESPN bowling for a couple of years. I also, from 85, for 25 years, the Cardinals were on Channel 5. And Jay Randolph also worked for NBC. So if he would go away to work for NBC, they let me do Cardinals play-by-play on Channel 5. So I did a bunch of those games too. So yeah, I had some experience, but not a lot.
How do you reflect back in 1998 with the Cardinals on the performance-enhancing drugs and involving Mark McGwire and the home run race? Like, what was that moment of sports coverage like?
Well, I'll be perfectly honest. I don't think we did our jobs very well back then because we all knew what was going on. It was clear. I mean, it wasn't just Mark McGwire hitting those home runs.
Yeah, Sammy Sosa,
Rafael Palmeiro, all these guys were guys who may have hit 10 to 12 home runs years previous were all of a sudden hitting 40 or 50 home runs. On the other hand, in terms of the fan experience, 1998 when McGwire broke the record, that the Cardinals were not very good in those years, and Mark McGwire was, must-see TV every single night. And so from a fan experience, I think people love it, and they look back on it, and they'd say, yeah, that was a lot of fun. But, there's a reason he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. So covering sports was your first role in St. Louis, but the majority of your time here was spent in news. And I understand that transition started in 2001 after the September 11th attacks.
Yeah. I had been offered the job to move into news, I think, about 1998 or so. And I said no, I was not interested. I was having so much fun, doing what we were doing in the sports department. But a couple of things happened. So TV was kind of changing a little bit. We had a big sports department. It was me, my producer, Andy Moeller. We had a weekend producer. We had Malcolm Briggs. We had Trey Wingo. And we had hired Frank Cusimano. So it was a big sports department, and we were working hard to make sure Sports Plus was great every single night. And TV stations were kind of getting away from those big sports departments. So I saw that writing on the wall, And then
But you were the sports director. I mean,
I wasn't worried about me losing my
Okay.
job. I was worried about shrinking staff and not being able to do the kind
see.
of stuff that we were doing, which I thought, this is what people expect, and the expectations were high. And I mean, we would have meetings. I would call a meeting every Monday morning, depending on what the ratings were for Sports Plus. And if they were a little down, I would go, well, what can we do to bring them back up? So, I just saw kind of the writing on the wall of what this could look like in a few years. And then, of course, 9/11 happened, and we did not do sports for probably a week after 9/11. Sports wasn't even going on. And so I was trying to help the news department in any way I could. I was making phone calls to doctors. I was, trying to go out and find any St. Louis connections to this awful experience for America. And I'm feeling kind of helpless. I felt like I wasn't really helping. And then when they offered it to me again shortly after that, I said yes, because I thought this would give me an opportunity to tell more. I had done sports for a long time. This would give me an opportunity to tell more stories, different kinds of stories. The world is kind of your oyster in terms of storytelling if you're doing news. And so that's when I made the decision.
Was it a hard switch?
Yeah, it was hard. I think the hardest thing is in sports, there's a little autonomy, not in terms of being able to spend money, because that's still in the hands of the news director. But they kind of leave you alone if you're doing okay. When you get into the news department, there's no leaving you alone. There's a lot of cooks. And so that was tough to get used to. It's not that I could just go do what I wanted to do. I had to
You had to work with producers.
I had to work with producers. I had to work with management, and so there was nothing wrong with that, but it was just something to get used to. But in terms of storytelling, in terms of anchoring, in terms of those kinds of things, that was not a difficult transition. Plus, I was working with an amazing team. My co-anchors over the years were Karen Foss and Kay Quinn and Kelly Jackson and Ann Allred and Deanne Lane. And, they all kind of embraced me, and, any trouble that I would have had, they made the transition very smooth.
Was there ever a concern about having credibility with the audience? Maybe them
Sure.
thinking, oh, well, why is the sports guy here?
Yeah, sure. There was concern about that. But that's not anything I could control other than
Right.
doing my job the best I could every single day. And so I think after a period of time, people now who stop me don't remember that I was ever in sports. People, I was from 2003 to 2 weeks ago, I was the news anchor. So a lot of people just grew up knowing me as the news anchor. But yeah, at first the transition, I was concerned if people would accept it. Fortunately, as time passed, people did.
If you have a question or comment for Mike Bush, we have some open phone lines. You can give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 314-382-TALK. Mike, why is now the right time to retire?
Well, I just turned 69 years old. My brother is very sick. He's 5 years younger than me. I have 4 grandchildren, and I just thought this would be a good time to try to get a little bit more flexibility in my life in terms of my time. One of the things, that people probably know, but when you're in the news business, TV news business, the hours are pretty terrible. My schedule basically for my entire career was, basically 1:30 to 10:30 at night. And it's never really that way, because sometimes when you want to do a story, they can only meet you at 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. or whatever it is. There's a lot of weekend work. Anytime there's breaking news, you got to come in. So I did that for all that time. And plus, for me, one of the things that really made me make the decision, I've spent a lot of time trying to focus on ordinary people doing extraordinary things and helping St. Louisans making a difference in town. But we do a lot of stories at the top of the newscast that are rough. And for many, many years, I was able to compartmentalize. I had as I got older, I don't know what happens to you when you get older, but I had a much harder time not taking some of those stories home with me. And I've always been kind of an insomniac, but some of those stories would really keep me up. And I thought, I think now with all these other things going on in my life, now would be a good time to try to focus on a new chapter where I can focus on people doing good things in the community and not have to deal with all these challenges that St. Louis faces every single day and the world faces every single day, and not have to be in it and report it and think about it so much. I just needed kind of a break from that.
In terms of the compartmentalization and not being able to do it as well as you got more into the business, when I think of your career, I think of your popular segment, Making a Difference, which is, as you say, highlighting the good, highlighting ordinary people doing great things. Was that always a way to deal with the bad news that you had to cover?
It kept me sane. It kept me sane. What happened was I had done the news maybe for a year, maybe not even that long, and I was just exasperated. This is, all the way back in the early 2000s. And so I went to our news director, Mike Shipley, and I said, listen, we got to try to find some balance in this newscast. It's just all bad, 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 bad. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And that's when we came up with Making a Difference. And I think, not only did it help keep me sane, getting to do those stories and seeing all the goodness out there, but also I think it added some balance for our viewers to see that, it's important to highlight some of the good stuff going on. Plus, I had worked for the Muscular Dystrophy Association doing their telethon for many, many years, and then the Musial Awards, which was also about kindness. And so I was getting my fix of people doing good things and kindness and all that. And then I just thought at the end that it was probably time to focus on that and not talk about all the bad stuff that's going on.
We have Linda calling from Crestwood. Linda, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Hi, thanks. I just want to say congratulations to Mike. He's my favorite newscaster. I'll miss him.
Oh, you're
and
so
he's still
nice.
My favorite. Well, you're still my favorite sportscaster, and I still smile when I hear you. I can picture you hearing you say, "Get the peanut butter," because here comes the jam.
Yeah, whatever the catchphrase was at the time. Yeah, well, that's so nice, Linda. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for your kindness. You've been such an asset to the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the call, Linda. We also have an email from Melissa in Belleville who says, your news coverage was a part of my home up until your last day. Your voice punctuated a lot of my childhood TV memories. Remembering watching Sports Plus with my late dad is one of the highlights of my childhood TV time with Dad. And Melissa adds, I also wanted to say, as soon as I heard your voice on the radio today, it made my mind go to those familiar feelings of home. Thank you for so many years of sports coverage that you've given to the area. So
that's so nice.
Melissa from Belleville. You mentioned the Stan Musial Awards, which is character awards, sportsmanship awards, kind of an extension, I think, of Making a Difference.
Right.
People in the sports world who are making a difference, who do good things.
Right.
You've been the host of that awards ceremony since its inception in 2005. Were you part of the planning of it, or did they come along and be like, hey, we have this thing, and Mike, we'd love for you to host it?
Well, it was not a thing, really, at the first event. The first event was Citizen through Sports Alliance. It was a very small event. It was downtown, and because I was doing Making a Difference, Frank Viverito, who was the president of the Sports Commission at the time, and Mark Schreiber, who is now the president of the Sports Commission, they asked me if I would just emcee this dinner. And I emceed the dinner, and we all went out to lunch shortly after. And I said, this could be so much more. This could make a great television show. And And so we started thinking about how we could do this, and we discovered, it was painstaking. It took a lot of work, but we got it to the point where it became a really good TV show, and then CBS picked it up. So it got national exposure for St. Louis and for kindness. And so we've been doing it at the Stiefel Theater the Saturday before Thanksgiving for many years now. Frank had the idea to change the name of the Musial Awards, which were the National Sportsmanship Awards, to the Musial Awards because obviously Stan Musial meant so much to St. Louis. He was a great ambassador for baseball. He was all about kindness. One of the things you may not know about Stan Musial, not only was he one of the greatest baseball players who ever lived, not only was he kind, he signed so many autographs in his day that they're not worth as much as, say, a Ted Williams or a Joe DiMaggio because they didn't sign that many. So, he kind of flooded the market with Stan Musial, and there's more of them than there are of those other guys. But that just shows you how kind he was. One of the great things about St. Louis is the accessibility. If you're a little boy and you're growing up, or a little girl, and you're growing up in New York during the time of, say, Mickey Mantle, your chances to meet Mickey Mantle were very slim. In St. Louis, your chances to meet Stan Musial were very high because he was everywhere, and he turned up. We a man named Ed Watkins and his wife Janet helped start a baseball camp for the hearing impaired in the 1990s, and they got me involved and actually named it the Mike Bush Baseball Camp for the Hearing Impaired, which was great. And who shows up to help us out? Stan Musial every year. He was just that kind of guy, and so it was the perfect name for these awards. And so Stan's name, is nationally recognized long after his passing. And we're so grateful that the Musial family is there every single year. They take after him. They're just kind, wonderful people.
And is that something you're going to continue to host?
I am. I'm going to continue to host that for as long as they'll have me. If you've ever been to the Musial Awards, you know what kind of night it is. You will leave that theater feeling really good about humanity because there are so many great stories that we tell, I mean, for me, it restores my faith in humanity anytime I'm thinking things are going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, you cannot not go to the Stan Musial Awards and not feel good.
Right.
And you're likely going to, if not cry, at least have watery eyes. And that is why they have specially branded tissues
on every chair.
Every chair at Stiefel Theater.
Right.
I've been to the ceremony before, and it is just an excellent night. We have to take another break. I'm talking with Mike Bush, who retired earlier this month after a 41-year career at KSDK Channel 5. We'll be back in just a moment and get to some more calls. We have a couple phone lines still open. You can give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 314-382-TALK. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio. Welcome back. I'm Alex Hoyer. I'm talking this hour with Mike Bush, who retired earlier this month after a more than 4-decade career at KSDK Channel 5. And I want to go right to the phone lines. We have Michael calling from St. Louis. Michael, you're on St. Louis on the Air. Thanks for calling.
Hey, Mike.
Hi.
I'm a retired reporter at the Post-Dispatch, and congratulations on your career. And I think St. Louis will be less good without you.
Oh, that's so nice.
And talk about what's happening in the news industry in St. Louis. There's a lot of consolidation at your end on TV and in print. How do you think this is affecting news gathering in our town?
Well, I'm very, very worried about it, to be perfectly honest. You may know that our company, the company that owns KSDK, is Tegna. and they own 60-some TV stations around the country. And Tegna was recently sold to Nexstar, and Nexstar is a behemoth. If they take over Tegna, they will own like more TV stations than anybody by far. A judge is currently holding that up because it breaks the FCC 39% rule. That's not actually an FCC rule. It's a rule by Congress where no company can own more than 39% of the television stations in the country. But the FCC recently voted to get rid of that rule. That also is going to be held up in court because, again, this was from Congress, and the FCC may not have that authority. But right now, I think what will happen if the sale goes through, and it's being held up by a judge right now, and it doesn't go to court till July of next year. My guess is that Nexstar, which already owns Channel 2 and Channel 11, and then would own Channel 5 as well, would consolidate that into one newsroom. That would be my guess. That's how they will save money. And then they probably would have two different anchor teams. But all the legacy, everything that KSDK has built over all these years, it was a Pulitzer station, then multimedia, then Gannett, then Tegna. I think that will go away, and there will be less reporters. They're not going to send in one newsroom, two different reporters to the mayor's news conference. They're going to send one, and that reporter will report for all the stations. And I just don't think that's good. I think in the world of local media, it's very important that we have local reporters holding local politicians, local leaders accountable. And so the less reporters we have, I think that's bad for the country. Right now, like I say, it's being held up by a judge, and KSDK continues to be independent of Nexstar. But after that trial, who the heck knows what's? It's not unlike what's happening with the Warner Brothers Paramount situation. So I don't think it's good, and it does concern me about the future, because I think local reporting is very important to the local community, and we've seen newspapers. If you work for the Post-Dispatch, you know how many reporters you used to have, and how many reporters there are today. It's a whole different world, and I just don't think it's good for the country.
Well, thank you for the call, Michael. We can certainly agree that local news is important and so valuable. Channel 5 has been through a lot of staff turnover, management changes, ownership changes. Mm-hmm. You highlighted the owners. How did you persist at the same station for 41 years when change is seemingly constant?
Yeah, it's true. Change is constant. I just think you try not to pay attention to it, even though there will be new managers coming in, whether it's a general manager or a news director. You just put your head down and try to do the best job you can, and some things are just not in your control. So you just can't worry about it. I always tried to be a hard worker. I always tried to, just do my job to the best of my ability every day. And, it worked out for 41 years. But definitely every time there was a change in management, we went 20-some years with the same news director, and then all of a sudden we've had,
several,
8 or 9 since he left. So it's always an upheaval. Everybody has their own ideas of what works. It used to be TV stations and newspapers too made a lot of money for their companies. I had a general manager tell me once that one day TV stations would have to get used to not making 57% on the dollar. I mean, what other business can you make 57% on the dollar? That doesn't mean it can't be profitable. The KSDK is making a profit, but it's not the kind of profit they used to make in the 1990s or the 1980s. So I just think in terms of surviving all of that, you just put your head down and do the best job you can, and hopefully you hang on.
Yeah, you talk about putting your head down, but you also, I imagine, wielded a lot of influence as a veteran journalist, somebody who had been there for a ton of time. How did you wield that influence for the better?
I mean, I always spoke up for kind of doing the right thing journalistically. Because I had been there for a long time, I think there was some respect from most of the people who were either general manager or news director coming in, and every once in a while they would ask my advice on something, and I'd give them my thoughts, and sometimes they'd listen to it, and sometimes they wouldn't. I'm not in the business of making money. My business was doing the best journalism I could. They're also in the business of making money, so decisions are made based on that, in addition to journalistic decisions. So sometimes what I wanted, because I thought it would be best for the viewers or best for our newsroom, may not have been the best business decision. So, they listened to me, but just to a point.
So I realize I'm asking this question of a news anchor, but what do you make of anchorless newscasts now, which I've seen coming up in spots around the country, including where I used to work in Cedar Rapids, Iowa?
Yeah. So one of the companies, Scripps, which used to be a very respected company that owned broadcast stations, again, everybody is trying different kinds of models, and the model that they're trying is not anchors. A lot of them don't even do live newscasts. Reporters go in the field. They put it in this. They put their report in a computer, and the computer decides what goes what on a newscast. Personally, I think having what you would call a traffic cop for all these stories and to help put things in context, anchors are needed. If you look at NBC Nightly News, CBS Evening News, ABC World News Tonight, they're basically doing the same kinds of newscasts they were doing in the 1960s. I mean, there are more bells and whistles. Their ability to reach the corners of the globe because of satellites and because of Wi-Fi and everything else, it's become much easier. But there's an anchor and there are reporters, and they do the best job they can to tell you about the world. I still think that's what people expect from local newscasts, and I think the idea of not having an anchor will not be successful. But like I say, because of this whole money thing and because of consolidation, people are throwing mud at the wall to try to see what will stick.
We have just 2 minutes left, and I have to ask, you would end your newscasts with, and there you have it. Mm-hmm. How did you come up with that catchphrase?
It was just one night. I grew up during the time where news anchors had catchphrases. Walter Cronkite used to say, "And that's the way it is."
Yep.
Yeah. And so I was trying to think of, is there a way I can sign this off? And I think someone may have said in something, "Well, there you have it." And I thought, oh, well, that would work. And so I started doing it on the news, and it just kind of stuck.
What's next for you, Mike?
Well, I'm still trying to figure that out. One thing I will still be doing, I'm going to be working part-time for Channel 5, still focusing on making a difference stories and other positive things in the community. One of the things I'm asked all the time is, why are you doing these stories? Why is this important? I think when we can highlight some of the good things going on in the community, that is just as important, maybe even more so, than highlighting the bad things in the community. And I just don't think we shine the spotlight enough on all the good going on in this town. St. Louis is very hard on itself, and St. Louis needs to know that there are amazing people here, and they're doing good things to help their friends, to help their neighbors, and I'm going to do my best to continue to shine a spotlight on that.
Well, Mike Bush, congratulations on such a long and successful career.
Thank you so much,
St. Louis
Alex.
Journalism has been much better with you having been a part of it.
Well, that's so nice of you to say. Thank
and
you.
The story's not over, so stay tuned. And there you have it. I'm Alex Hoyer.
Today's episode was produced by our executive producer, Alex Hoyer.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Hi, I'm Laura Hamden, and my colleague Jessica Rogan and I are your daily hosts of the Gateway newsletter. We meet with the editors in the STLPR newsroom every weekday to bring you the top local stories of the day in a quick and easy 6-minute read by 6 a.m. In an age of overwhelm, it's a refreshing, thoughtful take on the news day, if we do say so ourselves. Fine-tune your daily news habit with the Gateway newsletter. Subscribe at stlpr.org/gateway.